My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 28 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the teacher who told me I'd never write anything worth reading. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of rainy afternoon where bookstores feel like sanctuaries. I'd wandered into Barnes and Noble just to see if the staff had moved my book to the front table, a silly little habit I'd developed since publication day. That's when I saw her, standing in the fiction aisle, gray sweater, hair pulled into that same too-tight bun, the same sharp jaw, and judgmental eyes I remembered from high school. Mrs. Thatcher. That first, I froze. I couldn't move. My heart stuttered in my chest like it was trying to run without me. She looked exactly the same, like time had been too scared to touch her. But I had changed. The girl she once reduced to tears in a silent, humiliated classroom wasn't standing there anymore. Now I had straightened shoulders, confidence in my spine, and a book on the shelf with my name on it. She picked it up. I watched her fingers trace the embossed gold lettering, slowly mouthing the title. Her eyes scanned the blurb, lips moving slightly as she read the same synopsis I'd once printed out 100 times, terrified that no one would care. Her brow furrowed, not in disgust this time, but in curiosity. Something about that shift, that flicker of interest in her expression, made my pulse race. She didn't recognize me. Not yet. But I remembered everything 10 years ago. I sat in the second row of her creative writing class, notebook open, voice shaking, heart full of words I didn't know how to protect. I had shared a short story about my mother's illness, about grief and resilience. It was raw, too raw, maybe, but I was 17, and writing was how I breathed. When I finished reading, the room was silent. I remember thinking maybe, just maybe, they were moved. But Mrs. Thatcher didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her mouth twisted like the words had personally offended her. "Rachel," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you're wasting everyone's time. No one wants to read your sob stories. They're not good. You're not good." I didn't cry then. I waited until lunch, hiding in the bathroom with my sandwich untouched and my notebook in the trash. I stopped writing for a long time after that, because when someone like her tells you your voice doesn't matter, you believe them. But she was wrong. And now, standing there in the bookstore, watching her unknowingly hold the very thing she said I could never create, I knew this moment was mine. This is the story of how I turned that humiliation into a novel that hit the bestseller list, and made sure she saw it. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, one of those places where the air smells like engine oil and fresh cut grass, and people don't talk about dreams unless they come with a pension. It was conservative, quiet, the kind of town where girls were taught to be polite, to be practical, to be realistic. My dad was a mechanic who came home every night with grease on his hands and a tired smile. My mom ran a daycare out of our home, always surrounded by toddlers and toys and the faint scent of baby wipes. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Enough to eat, enough to laugh, and most importantly, they gave me the space to dream, even when they didn't fully understand it. Ever since I could hold a pen, I wrote stories. On napkins, on receipts, on the backs of math homework and grocery lists. Stories were my hiding place, my safe place. They were where I could make sense of the things that didn't make sense, like why kids whispered behind my back at school, or why I always felt like I was standing just outside the circle. Writing wasn't a hobby for me. It was survival. By the time I got to high school, I'd perfected the art of invisibility. I was awkward, quiet, the girl who sat in the back of the classroom and spoke only when called on. I had a stutter that came and went with my anxiety, and I never knew which words would betray me next. I didn't go to parties, didn't have a boyfriend, didn't know how to do makeup, but I had notebooks, dozens of them, full of characters I wished I could be, full of voices that didn't shake when they spoke. English class was supposed to be my sanctuary, the one place where I could finally be seen, not for what I lacked, but for what I could create. And for a while, I believed it might be. Until I met Mrs. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher was a legend at our school. The tough teacher, the gatekeeper, to every AP writing class and literary scholarship. People respected her, feared her, some even worshipped her. She wore turtlenecks year-round, red lipstick that never smudged, and had this way of making silence feel like judgment. She wasn't cruel in obvious ways. Not at first. Her words were sharp, but she wrapped them in professionalism, like poison, disguised as feedback. She said she saw something in me, that she wanted to push me, but her version of pushing didn't feel like mentorship. It felt like slow erosion. She picked apart every sentence I wrote, every journal entry, every short story. She'd return my papers covered in red ink, margins bleeding with words like cliché, melodramatic, or try again. She told me my characters were thin, my dialogue unrealistic, my structure weak. She rarely told me what worked, only what didn't. But still, I kept writing, not for her approval, but because I had to, because it was the only thing that made me feel alive. And then my dad got sick. It started with fatigue, then weight loss, then the kind of pain that makes grown men wince and grip the edge of the kitchen counter. The diagnosis was brutal. Late-stage pancreatic cancer. He went from fixing cars to barely making it out of bed. My world shrank overnight. I started missing classes to help my mom at home, running errands, cooking dinner, helping my younger brother with his homework. I was exhausted, terrified, grieving in slow motion, but I still wrote. I had to. It was the only way I knew how to process what was happening. That's when I wrote the asterisk essay, the one that poured out of me in a single night like a wound opening. It was raw and unfiltered, about watching my father fade away in front of me, about the smell of the morphine patches, the way his voice changed, the ache of pretending to be strong. It wasn't polished, but it was honest, more honest than anything I'd ever written. I turned it in with trembling hands. For once, I didn't care about the grade. I just wanted someone, especially her, to read it and understand, maybe even say, this mattered, that it was real, that I was real. But what I got instead was something I'd never forget, a humiliation so sharp it stayed lodged in my ribs for years. That essay didn't just change my grade, it changed everything. Mrs. Thatcher didn't just give me an F on that essay, she weaponized it. The day she handed it back, I knew something was off. She was smiling, but not in the way teachers smile when they're proud. It was tight, cruel, the kind of smile someone wears when they're about to perform a public execution. I sat in my usual seat, third row from the front, notebook open, pen trembling in my hand. She held up my paper like it was a prop, and with an almost amused glint in her eye, she said, "Class, today we're going to take a look at an example of what not to do." I didn't know she meant mine. Not until she started reading. At first, I was confused. The words were familiar, but out of context. Vulnerable phrases I barely remembered writing. Lines about hospital visits, about the smell of antiseptic, and the way my dad's hand felt when I held it. In the dark. Then she laughed. Not a full laugh, just a sharp exhale, like a joke had snuck up on her. This, she said, holding up the essay like a dirty napkin, is what happens when someone confuses trauma with talent. The room went still. No one laughed with her. No one breathed. I sat frozen in my chair, every cell in my body turning cold. My words, the most honest, painful ones I'd ever put on paper, were now the subject of public mockery. She didn't stop. She kept going, flipping through the pages like she was dissecting a failed experiment. She circled sentences in red and called them overwrought, pointed to a paragraph about my father's breathing machine and said, "Notice the melodrama. This isn't how you earn empathy from a reader." Then came the final blow. She held up the last page and looked directly at me, voice calm, almost pitying. "If this is what you think writing is, Rachel, you're in the wrong room. And the wrong dream." I couldn't move. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I gathered my things slowly, deliberately, like if I moved too fast I'd shatter. I walked out of the classroom in complete silence, the weight of 100 staring eyes on my back, and didn't stop until I reached the nearest bathroom. I locked myself in the last stall, sat on the closed toilet seat, and broke into sobs so violent I thought I'd throw up. I stayed in that stall until the bell rang, then another after that. I didn't go to my next class. I didn't go home right away either. I wandered the halls like a ghost, not fully present, barely tethered to my body. That moment rewired something in me. It was like a light went out, not all at once, but in stages. I stopped writing in class. Then, I stopped writing altogether. I deleted the draft of the novel I'd been working on, tore up my journals. My notebooks gathered dust under my bed. I became smaller after that, quieter. I avoided eye contact, skipped assignments, let my GPA nosedive. I stopped raising my hand in class, avoided group projects, turned down every invitation that came my way. I didn't go to prom, didn't attend senior night. When people tried to talk to me, I gave them polite, clipped answers. No one knew how to help, and no one really tried. Not even when my dad died 6 months later. The cancer took him quickly, but not quietly. He deteriorated. In our living room, surrounded by machines we rented with borrowed money. I didn't cry at the funeral. I couldn't. It felt like everything inside me had already been scraped hollow. When it was my turn to speak, I just stood at the podium, hands shaking, and said thank you. Then I sat down. But even then, even when I thought I'd buried that part of myself, the words never left. They lived under my skin like embers, glowing softly in the dark. I didn't write them down anymore, but I **** them. In the car, in the shower, in dreams. Whole paragraphs would form in my head and disappear before I could grab a pen. They were angry words, hungry words, words that wanted to be let out. I just wasn't ready to give them air, not yet. College was never really an option. After my dad died, the savings we had went to medical bills, and my mom was barely holding things together with the daycare. I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth, took a job waiting tables at a local diner, and did what everyone in our town expected me to do: survive. I worked double shifts, came home with aching feet and the scent of fryer grease in my clothes. Then later, I got a job as a receptionist at a dentist's office, answering phones and scheduling root canals with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I was polite, predictable, the kind of girl who looked like she'd stopped dreaming years ago. But every night, I wrote. Not the way I used to. Not boldly. Not with the belief that I had something to say. But quietly, privately, I wrote in the margins of planner pages, on scraps of receipts, in spiral notebooks I kept under my bed. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom. Not my co-workers. Not even the one or two friends I still had. Because even after all these years, I couldn't shake the sound of Mrs. Thatcher's voice. Sharp, smug, final. No one wants to read your sob stories. Her words haunted every page. Every time I dared to hope that something I wrote might matter, her voice would cut through. I started editing before I even finished sentences. I second-guessed every idea. Still, I couldn't stop. The words were like a low hum under my skin. Relentless, waiting. I submitted a short story once to a small online contest, under a fake name, using a burner email. It was about a girl who watched her father die and tried to make sense of it through poetry. It was rejected. No feedback. Just a simple, not what we're looking for. And just like that, Mrs. Thatcher's voice was back in my head, louder than ever. Then one night, during a panic attack, I pulled out my old high school essay, the one she had read aloud to humiliate me. I had kept it, tucked between yearbooks and birthday cards I never opened. I don't even know why I'd saved it. Some part of me couldn't let it go. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, red ink bleeding through the paper like open wounds. I sat on the edge of my bed, chest tight, heart racing, prepared to confirm every awful thing she'd said. But I didn't hate it. I cried. But not from shame. From grief. From recognition. The words were raw. Yes. But honest. They were mine. And for the first time, I saw the truth beneath all that red ink. It was good. Maybe not perfect. Maybe not polished. But real asterisk. There was something alive in that piece. Something she couldn't kill, no matter how hard she tried. That night, something shifted. I opened my laptop, created a blank document, and started typing. Not another essay, not a short story, a novel. It started as a fictionalized version of my life, but quickly grew into something bigger. It was about a girl who'd been silenced, who was mocked for her grief, shamed for her voice. A girl who fought, slowly, painfully, to reclaim it. I poured everything into that manuscript. The humiliation, the loneliness, the guilt of not speaking at my father's funeral, the rage, the ache, the quiet, stubborn hope. It took 2 years to finish. 2 years of writing from midnight to 3 a.m. After long shifts at the front desk. 2 years of ramen dinners, missed birthdays, lost friendships. I stopped going out. I stopped watching TV. I wrote on holidays, on sick days, on the floor of my tiny apartment when my back couldn't take the chair anymore. I bled for that book, in the way only someone who's been silenced truly understands. But with every chapter, I felt lighter, stronger. It wasn't just storytelling, it was healing. When I finally finished the manuscript, I cried again. Not because I thought it would be published, but because I did it. I proved her wrong, even if no one ever read it. But deep down, I hoped someone would. So I researched agents, crafted a query letter, and hit send 47 times. I got rejected by 43 of them. Some never responded. Others sent form emails that felt cold, impersonal. Every rejection stung, but not in the same way Mrs. Thatcher's had. Because now, I knew better. I knew rejection wasn't the same as worthlessness. I kept going. Then, one day, I got a reply. It was short, warm. A woman named Kayla had read my manuscript in one sitting. She said the voice felt authentic, that it stayed with her, that it made her cry. "Let's make this real," she wrote. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, rereading the message over and over. Then I burst into tears, the kind that come from exhaustion, from relief, from the slow, stubborn return of belief. Kayla became my agent. She was kind, direct, and honest in a way that healed me. We revised the book for months, trimmed the fat, strengthened the spine, but never once did she asked me to soften the story. She believed in the fire behind it, and for the first time, so did I. 1 year after Kayla's email, my book hit the shelves. I remember walking into a bookstore and seeing it there, face out on a display table, my name printed across the cover, glossy and gold. I stood there staring at it for a long time, heart pounding like it was the first time I'd ever seen my own reflection. The reviews started pouring in a few weeks later. Words like raw, brutally honest, a voice that cuts through the noise. Readers sent emails. Some told me they cried. Others said they saw themselves in my story. The girl who'd been silenced, shamed, told to sit down and stay small. A teacher in Oregon wrote to say she was putting my book on her curriculum for students dealing with loss. I read every message through tears, and every single one of them stitched something in me back together. Then I was invited to speak at a literary panel in Cincinnati, not far from where I'd grown up. The topic was writing through grief, and I sat beside authors whose names had once lined my shelves. It was surreal. I talked about trauma, about healing, about the moment I found my voice again. I didn't say Mrs. Thatcher's name, but I talked about the teacher who tried to crush me. I saw heads nodding in the audience. People knew that kind of cruelty. I wasn't alone anymore. After the panel, there was a signing table. A long line formed, mostly women, some young, some older. They told me their stories in hushed voices, about brothers they lost, mothers who couldn't say I love you, teachers who told them they'd never make it. I signed every book with shaking hands. And then, near the end of the line, I saw her. Gray sweater, the same sharp mouth, that unmistakable posture, upright, proud, rigid with judgment. Mrs. Thatcher, my breath caught. For a moment, I wasn't 28. I was 17 again, standing in the middle of her classroom, my heart in my throat. But she didn't recognize me. Not yet. She stepped forward, holding a copy of my book like it weighed nothing to her. "Could you sign this for my niece?" she asked, her voice polite, almost warm. "She's in high school, wants to write." I took the book from her, looked her square in the eye. My hands were steady, my voice calm. "Sure," I said. Then I smiled. "Should I make it out to no one wants to read your sob stories?" Her face paled, like all the blood had drained from it at once. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. And then I saw it. Recognition. It rippled across her face like a slap. Her eyes widened, her jaw tensed. "You used to teach me," I said, soft but clear. "Rachel Carter." Silence, then, barely above a whisper. "You wrote this?" I nodded. "Every word. Even the ones you said no one would care about." I opened the book to the title page, picked up my pen, and wrote slowly, deliberately. Not for her, but for every girl like me. To the girls whose voices were told they were too much. Keep writing. Love, Rachel Carter. I handed it back to her. She took it with stiff fingers, eyes still on the inscription. She didn't say thank you, didn't offer congratulations, She didn't say anything at all. She just turned and walked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in her presence. I felt powerful. That moment didn't fix everything. It didn't rewind the years I spent doubting myself, didn't soothe the ache of missed opportunities, or fill the hollow spaces left by humiliation. It didn't bring my dad back. It didn't undo the afternoons I spent crying in secret, convinced I'd never be enough. But it gave me something deeper. Power. Not over Mrs. Thatcher. Not in the theatrical, triumphant way we imagine revenge stories ending. No, this was quieter, stronger. It was power over me, over the scared, silenced girl I used to be. The one who used to tear up her stories before anyone else could judge them. The one who hid every part of herself that felt too much. After the book came out, I kept writing. I wrote another novel. Different characters, different story, but still rooted in truth. Then another. With each one, my voice grew steadier, bolder. I stopped apologizing for being emotional. I stopped editing myself for approval. I began speaking at schools, reading to students who reminded me of who I used to be. Awkward, shy, carrying notebooks full of words they were afraid to share. I started a mentorship program for girls who'd been told their stories didn't matter, who'd been laughed at, shut down, dismissed. We called it louder because that's what we were doing, turning up the volume on the voices they'd been told to mute. I met girls who cried during our first meetings, too afraid to read their poems aloud. 6 months later, they were performing them on stage. I received emails from teens who said, "You made me believe I could write." And every time I heard that, every time someone said I helped them believe, I thought of that girl locked in the bathroom stall, holding her breath to stay quiet, sobbing into her sleeves so no one would hear. She's still with me. She always will be. But now, she has a microphone. I used to think revenge meant proving someone wrong, that it meant walking back into the room, holding up your success like a trophy, and watching them eat their words. And maybe part of me will always love that Mrs. Thatcher saw my book and realized who I'd become. But real revenge, the kind that heals instead of just hurts back, it's becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and doing it loudly, unapologetically, with your name on the cover. People sometimes ask me if I ever forgave her, if I ever found it in myself to let go of the bitterness, the shame, the anger that curled around my memory of Mrs. Thatcher like barbed wire. And the truth, I don't think about her much anymore. Not really. She's a footnote in a story that no longer revolves around her. For years, she took up so much space in my mind, her voice echoing louder than my own. But now, my voice fills rooms, pages, stages, and hers is just background noise I've long since tuned out. Still, sometimes, when I walk past the writing section at a bookstore, I wonder what it would feel like if she walked in, if she saw my name, not once, but across multiple covers, if she picked up a copy, flipped through the pages, and realized those words, the ones she said would never matter, had reached people across the country, maybe even the world. I imagine the moment when she realizes she wasn't the narrator of my life after all. She was just an obstacle, a minor villain, a chapter one outgrew. So no, I didn't get revenge by hurting her. I didn't send angry letters or confront her in a way that demanded an apology. She was never capable of giving. I didn't need to. Because the greatest revenge wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about proving myself right. I got revenge by healing, by reclaiming the story she tried to take from me. And then I handed it to the world, every raw, painful, beautiful word of it, and said, asterisk here, read it, asterisk.